I always thought our life was a painting, vibrant and whole, each stroke deliberate. Clara and I had been married for 12 years, our home in Portland a canvas of shared dreams. Her pottery studio in the garage, my library of first edition books lining the living room. We'd built something, hadn't we? The kind of life you point to and say, that's us. But paintings can hide cracks, and I didn't see ours until it was too late. Clara was a whirlwind of warmth, her auburn hair catching sunlight like a halo. She'd laugh at my terrible puns, her eyes crinkling, and we'd spend evenings on the porch, her feet in my lap, talking about everything, art, travel, the way rain sounded on our tin roof. But lately, she'd been distant, her laughter rarer, her gaze slipping past me to some horizon I couldn't see. I chalked it up to her new pottery exhibition, the stress of deadlines. She'd been spending long hours at the studio, coming home with clay smudged on her cheeks, her hands rough from the wheel. I'd kiss her forehead, make dinner, and wait for her to resurface. It was a Tuesday when the first hint landed. I'd gone to the grocery store, picking up her favorite chamomile tea, when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Asterisk check her studio. You'll see. Asterisk no name, no context. I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the delete button. Prank, I thought. Some disgruntled client from her show. But the words burrowed into me, sharp and cold. I paid for the tea and drove home, the message a weight in my pocket. That night, Clara was late again. I sat in the kitchen, the clock ticking past 10, then 11. When she finally walked in, her coat was damp from the drizzle, her smile tired but bright. Sorry, love, she said, kissing my cheek. Got caught up with a new glaze technique. Her hands were clean, no clay under her nails. I nodded, swallowing the question clawing at my throat. Why lie about something so small? The next day, I did something I'd never done. I went to her studio during lunch, my heart pounding like I was trespassing in my own life. The garage door was locked, the windows covered with burlap. I knocked, called her name. No answer. I stood there, rain soaking my jacket, the anonymous text looping in my mind. I told myself it was nothing, that I was being paranoid. But as I turned to leave, I saw it. A man's scarf, navy blue with red stripes, caught in the doorframe. It wasn't mine. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I took the scarf, folded it into my briefcase, and went back to work. My hands shook as I typed emails, my mind spinning scenarios. Clara wasn't the type to stray. She'd always been my anchor, the one who'd pull me back when I overthought things. But anchors can slip, can't they? I spent the afternoon Googling the scarf's brand, cross-referencing it with local stores, as if fabric could tell me who. It was irrational, but I needed something tangible, something to hold on to before the ground gave way. By dinner, I was calm, or at least pretending to be. Clara chatted about her day, her voice light, her fingers tracing the rim of her wineglass. I watched her, searching for a tell. A glance too long, a pause too heavy. Nothing. She was perfect, as always, but perfection can be a mask, and I was starting to wonder what lay beneath. That night, I lay awake, the scarf hidden in my closet, its stripes burning behind my eyes. I didn't know who he was, but I'd find out. And when I did, I'd understand why Clara was pulling away, and what she'd traded us for. The scarf became my obsession, a riddle I couldn't leave alone. Every morning, I'd check it, running my fingers over its wool, as if it could whisper a name. Clara didn't notice my distraction. She was too busy, her schedule a blur of meetings with gallery owners and late-night studio sessions. I told myself I was imagining things, that the scarf could belong to a friend, a client, anyone. But doubt is a weed, and it was spreading. I started small, checking her phone when she showered, something I'd never thought I'd do. Her passcode was our anniversary, still unchanged, which felt like a cruel irony. No suspicious texts, no unknown contacts. Just emails about her exhibition and photos of her latest vases, their curves glowing under studio lights. I felt guilty, my stomach twisting, but I couldn't stop. The scarf wasn't nothing. It was evidence. I began tracking her routine, casually asking about her day, noting inconsistencies. She'd say she was at the studio, but her car was parked downtown, near the art district. I'd drive by, pretending I was running errands, my eyes scanning for her auburn hair. Once, I saw her outside a cafe, laughing with a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, with dark curls and a leather jacket, his hand brushing her arm. My grip tightened on the steering wheel, but I didn't stop. I didn't want to believe it yet. The anonymous texter struck again a week later. Another message. Ask about her mentor. No signature, just those 4 words. Her mentor? Clara hadn't mentioned one, not in years. She'd studied under a few Potters in college, but they were long gone from her life. I dug into her old emails, scrolling through archives, my laptop screen a haze of names and dates. Nothing stood out, but the word mentor stuck, a splinter I couldn't pull. I decided to play detective in earnest. I called the gallery hosting her exhibition, pretending to be a client confirming her schedule. The receptionist was chatty, mentioning Clara's frequent meetings with a local artist, Julian Reese. The name hit me like a slap. Julian was a sculptor, known for his massive installations, his charm as big as his reputation. I'd met him once at a fundraiser, his handshake firm, his smile too easy. Clara had called him inspiring, her voice warm. I hadn't thought twice. Now I couldn't think of anything else. I Googled him, my screen filling with photos, Julian at openings, Julian with collectors, Julian with Clara at a workshop last month, her hand on his shoulder. My chest tightened. I cross-referenced his social media, finding posts about Portland, about clay and fire, about collaborations with unnamed partners. One photo showed a studio, not hers, with a navy scarf on a chair. My scarf. My proof. I didn't confront her. I couldn't, not without knowing everything. Instead, I followed her, my car a shadow trailing hers. She'd leave for the studio, but end up at a loft downtown, Julian's address from a quick property search. She'd stay for hours, emerging with her hair loose, her smile brighter than it had been at home. I'd park across the street, my camera snapping blurry photos, each one a knife in my gut. She wasn't just working. She was living a life I wasn't part of. At home, I played the devoted husband, cooking her favorites, asking about her art. She'd talk, her words a performance, and I'd nod, my mind cataloging her lies. I found receipts in her purse, coffee shops, restaurants, places she'd never mentioned. One had a handwritten note. See you tomorrow, Jay. I kept it, adding it to my growing file, a dossier of betrayal. I wasn't angry yet, not fully. I was cold, methodical, building a case. Clara thought she was clever, but I was learning her game. And soon I'd know enough to break it. Clara's lies were a tapestry, intricate and deliberate, but I was unraveling them thread by thread. Each day brought new clues, small but sharp. A lipstick shade she never wore, a playlist on her phone heavy with jazz she'd once mocked, a faint cologne on her scarf that wasn't mine. I didn't ask questions. Asking would tip her off, and I needed her to think I was still the trusting fool she'd counted on. I started mapping Julian's world, piecing together his influence. His loft was a hub for artists, a place where Clara spent more time than at her own studio. I hacked into her gallery's shared calendar. Her login was predictable, her mother's maiden name, and saw recurring consultations with him, slotted during hours she claimed to be alone. I visited his exhibitions, blending into crowds, watching him charm collectors. He was magnetic, his voice low and warm, his eyes lingering on women like he was memorizing them. I hated him, not for who he was, but for what he'd taken. One night, I followed Clara to a gallery event, staying in the shadows. She wore a green dress, one I'd bought her for our 10th anniversary, its silk catching the light. Julian was there, his hand grazing her back as they laughed over wine. I stood outside, rain blurring my view, my breath fogging the glass. A woman nearby, another artist, muttered to her friend, "They're always together. It's obvious, isn't it?" Her friend nodded and I felt the ground shift. Others knew. I wasn't alone in seeing it. I began testing Clara, dropping hints to gauge her reaction. Over dinner, I mentioned Julian casually, saying I'd read about his latest piece. Her fork paused, her smile tight. "Oh, he's talented," she said, her voice too even. "We've talked shop a few times." Shop. The word was a lie, and I saw it in her eyes, a flicker of fear. I smiled back, my heart a stone. She thought she was safe, but she was walking a tightrope, and I was holding the scissors. The anonymous texter became my shadow ally. A third message arrived. "Look at her sketchbook." I found it in her studio, tucked under a pile of clay-stained rags. The pages were filled with her usual designs. Vases, bowls, but toward the back, hidden like a confession, were drawings of hands, not hers. Strong, angular, with a ring on the thumb. Julian's hands, I was sure. I photographed them, my hands steady, my mind racing. She was sketching him, capturing him in ways she hadn't captured me in years. I started planting traps. I'd leave my phone unlocked, a fake email open about a work trip, to see if she'd check it. She did, her fingers quick, her face blank when I returned. I'd mention a late meeting, then come home early, catching her startled, her phone face down. She was covering tracks, but she wasn't perfect. I found a burner phone in her glove compartment, its call log empty except for one number, dialed daily. I didn't call it. I didn't need to. At night, she'd sleep beside me, her breathing soft, and I'd stare at the ceiling, imagining her with him. Not just moments, but a life. Laughing, planning, sharing things she'd stopped sharing with me. I wasn't just losing her. I was being erased. The pain was a blade, but I sharpened it into focus. I began researching Julian's past. Lawsuits, debts, anything to leverage. He wasn't clean. No one that smooth ever is. I found a disgruntled ex-client, a woman who'd sued him for fraud. She was willing to talk, for a price. By now, I was a ghost in my own home, smiling through dinners, kissing her goodnight, all while plotting. Clara thought she was writing a new story, one where I didn't fit. But stories can be rewritten, and I was ready to pen the ending. Not with confrontation, not with tears, with something colder, sharper, something she'd never see coming. My life became a dual existence. One foot in the present, playing the husband Clara expected, the other in a shadow world, collecting fragments of her betrayal. I was meticulous, my anger a fuel I burned slowly. Every receipt, every photo, every sketch in her book was cataloged in a locked file on my laptop, password protected behind a code she'd never guess. Our wedding date, reversed. Irony was my armor now. I met the ex-client Marianne at a diner across town. She was bitter, her eyes sharp with old wounds. Julian had promised her a custom sculpture, taken her money, and delivered nothing but excuses. He's a parasite, she said, stirring her coffee. Charms you, uses you, moves on. I asked about Clara, careful not to seem too eager. Marian smirked. The potter? Yeah, she's in deep. Saw them at his loft, all cozy. He's got a type. Creative, married, vulnerable. The word vulnerable stung. Clara wasn't weak, but maybe I'd missed something, some crack Julian had slipped into. I paid Marianne for documents, emails, contracts, proof of Julian's scams. It wasn't enough to ruin him, not yet, but it was a start. I needed more, something undeniable. I hired a private investigator, a quiet man named Ellis with a handshake like steel. I gave him the burner phone's number, Julian's address, Clara's schedule. Discretion, I said. He nodded, his eyes unreadable. You'll know what I find. I didn't tell him about the revenge forming in my mind, but he seemed to sense it, a weight in my voice. Ellis was fast. Within days, he sent photos. Clara entering Julian's loft, her arm linked with his. Julian buying her coffee, his hand on her wrist. Them at a park, her head on his shoulder. Each image was a punch, but I studied them, memorizing details. The way she smiled, unguarded. The way he leaned in, possessive. There were audio clips too, snippets from a bug Ellis placed in Julian's studio. Clara's voice, soft, saying, "You make me feel alive." I played it on loop, letting it carve into me, turning pain into purpose. I started sabotaging her lies, small moves to unsettle her. I'd call the studio when I knew she wasn't there, leaving voicemails she'd have to explain. I'd rearrange her tools, just enough to make her pause, to wonder if she was slipping. Once I left the scarf, his scarf, on her workbench, folded neatly. She came home pale, her excuse about a long day stumbling over itself. I smiled, asked about her glaze, watched her squirm. She was starting to feel me closing in. The anonymous texter sent a fourth message. She's planning a trip. I checked her laptop while she slept, finding a hidden folder labeled Inspiration. Inside were emails to Julian, encrypted but poorly. Her password was his initials. They were planning a weekend in Seattle, a work retreat. She told me it was a solo trip, a chance to clear her head. I printed the emails, added them to my file, my hand steady. She was building a future without me, but I was building something too. I began laying groundwork for revenge, not just against her but him. Julian's ego was his weakness, his art, his reputation. I contacted galleries anonymously, hinting at his shady deals, planting seeds of doubt. I joined online forums, using fake names to question his work, linking to Marianne's lawsuit. It was subtle, a slow poison, but I saw ripples. Cancelled bookings, tense posts from his team. Clara noticed too, her mood darkening, her calls to him longer, her lies clumsier. At home, I was the perfect husband, cooking her favorite risotto, planning a date night she couldn't refuse. She went along, her smile strained, her hand cold in mine. I looked at her across the table, her beauty a mask I no longer trusted, and felt the storm inside me gather. She thought she was winning, but she was wrong. I wasn't just watching anymore. I was ready to strike. The truth was a blade I held close, its edge cutting deeper with every discovery. Clara's lies were unraveling faster now, her confidence slipping like sand through her fingers. I saw it in the way she checked her phone, her glances at me when she thought I wasn't looking, the way she'd linger in the shower, as if washing away guilt. I didn't confront her. I wasn't ready to show my hand, but I tightened the noose, inch by inch. Ellis delivered a bombshell. A video from Julian's loft, grainy but unmistakable. Clara and Julian, tangled in a moment that wasn't art, wasn't work, wasn't anything she could explain away. Her laughter, his whispers, the way she moved. It was intimate, deliberate, a betrayal carved in light and shadow. I watched it once, my jaw clenched, then saved it to a drive, locked in my safe. It wasn't just proof. It was ammunition. I dug deeper into Julian's life, finding cracks in his facade. He owed money, big money, to a collector who didn't take kindly to delays. I reached out, posing as a concerned buyer, and learned Julian was juggling debts, his charm stretched thin. I fed this to Ellis, who tracked the collector's moves, hinting at pressure I could exploit. Julian wasn't invincible, and neither was Clara's fantasy. I'd make sure of it. At home, I turned the screws. I'd mention Seattle casually, watching her freeze, her excuse about the trip stumbling. I left a travel brochure on the counter, circled with hotels she'd emailed Julian about. Her eyes widened, but she said nothing, her silence a confession. I started inviting her to my work events, knowing she'd decline, her evenings booked with him. Each refusal was a brick in the wall I was building, isolating her in her own lies. The anonymous texter sent a final message. She's choosing him. It came with a photo, Clara and Julian at a bar, her hand on his knee, her smile one I hadn't seen in years. I didn't know who the texter was, a friend, a rival, someone hurt like me, but they'd given me enough. I stopped expecting more, my focus now on the endgame. Clara wasn't just drifting. She was planning a life, one where I was a footnote. I wouldn't let her write me out. I began crafting my revenge, not with fists or shouts, but with precision. I contacted a lawyer quietly, laying out assets, preparing for the worst. I met with a tech friend, learning how to trace digital footprints, to expose what Clara thought was hidden. I even visited Julian's loft when I knew they were out, slipping inside with a copied key from Ellis. I didn't touch anything, just looked, memorizing the space where she'd betrayed me. The clay dust on the floor, her mugs on his shelf. It was theirs, not ours. Clara sensed the shift, her nerves fraying. She'd snap over small things. Burnt toast, a misplaced book, then apologize, her arms around me, her warmth a lie. I held her back, my voice steady, my heart a furnace. She thought she could play both sides, keep me tethered while she flew. But I was done being her anchor. I was the storm now, gathering strength, waiting for the moment to break. By the end of the week, I had a plan not just to confront but to destroy. Not her body, not his, but their world, their illusions, their futures. I'd use every secret, every lie, every moment they thought was theirs. Clara had chosen, and so had I. The next step wasn't about understanding why, it was about making them pay, in a way they'd never forget. I looked at her that night, asleep beside me, and felt nothing but resolve. The edge was here and I was ready to push. Clara's world was clay, her hands shaping it into forms that galleries fought over. But I was learning it was also her shield. She and Julian weren't just sharing moments. They were crafting something, a joint sculpture, a secret project she'd kept from me. I found hints in her sketchbook, pages I'd missed before. Sketches of a massive piece, two figures entwined, labeled ours. Not hers, not his, but theirs. It was more than infidelity. It was a creation that excluded me, a monument to their connection. I'd always admired her art, framing her sketches, bragging about her to friends. Now it was a knife. This sculpture wasn't just clay. It was their story, molded in secret, a betrayal more intimate than any touch. I imagined it towering in some gallery, critics praising its passion, unaware it was built on my ruin. I couldn't let it stand, but destroying it outright was too simple. I wanted them to feel its collapse, to watch their pride crumble. Ellis, my investigator, was relentless. He got me blueprints of Julian's loft, schedules of their meetings, even a guest list for their Seattle trip, disguised as an artist's retreat. Clara had lied about it again, claiming it was a solo getaway, but her suitcase held 2 tickets, tucked under silk scarves. I photographed them, my hands steady, my mind a furnace. She was planning to unveil their sculpture there, a debut to cement their partnership and their bond. I'd make sure it was their undoing. I deepened my sabotage, targeting Julian's reputation first. Using burner accounts, I leaked Marianne's lawsuit to art blogs, framing it as a pattern Julian's charm masking fraud. Galleries whispered, bookings wavered. I sent anonymous tips to collectors, hinting at his debts, sowing doubt. Clara noticed, her calls to him frantic, her mood brittle. She'd snap at me, then soften, her guilt a clumsy mask. I played along, cooking her dinners, asking about her work, each smile a trap. At night, I studied their sculpture sketches, stolen from her studio. The figures were abstract, but I saw me erased, replaced by him. I met my tech friend, Sam, who taught me to hack deeper, tracing Clara's emails to Julian. They used a private server, thinking it safe, but Sam cracked it. Their messages were poetry, not just plans, talk of merging souls, of a life where art was their language. She called him her muse, a word she'd once used for me. I printed every word, my file growing, a testament to their arrogance. I tested Clara's limits, leaving clues to unnerve her. I'd hum jazz, his music, while washing dishes, watching her flinch. I bought a thumb ring, like his, wearing it casually, her eyes darting to it. Once, I left a Seattle Galleries card on her desk, circled in red. She burned it, her fingers trembling, but said nothing. She was unraveling, her lies a house of cards, and I was the wind. Yet she clung to her secret, thinking she could outrun me. I met the lawyer again, refining my plan. I didn't want divorce, not yet. I wanted control, leverage to dismantle their world before she knew what hit her. I froze our joint accounts, subtly, citing security concerns. She didn't notice, too distracted by Julian's troubles. I contacted the Seattle Gallery, posing as a donor, learning their sculpture's unveiling was the centerpiece of a major show. Perfect. It was the stage for my revenge, a spotlight they'd regret. Clara came home late, clay on her hands, her smile forced. I poured her wine, asked about her day, my voice warm. She talked about glazes, exhibitions, but her eyes were elsewhere, on him, on their dream. I looked at her, my wife, my betrayer, and felt the plan solidify. This wasn't just about ending things. It was about rewriting their story, turning their masterpiece into ash, and making sure they'd never forget my name. Control became my language. Each move a string I pulled to tighten the noose around Clara and Julian. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was directing, shaping their world to my design. The sculpture was their heart, so it would be my weapon. I learned its details, 6 feet tall, fired in a custom kiln, fragile until sealed. They'd poured months into it, their emails gushing about its truth. I'd make that truth a lie. I escalated my campaign against Julian, surgical and silent. I hired a forger, a quiet woman named Lena, to plant fake invoices in his gallery system, suggesting he'd double-billed clients. The art world thrives on trust. I was eroding his. A collector backed out, then another, rumors spreading like ink in water. Clara's stress was palpable. She'd pace at night, her phone buzzing with his calls. I'd lie awake, listening, my silence a blade sharpening. Ellis uncovered more. Julian was using Clara, not just for love but for her reputation. Her name on their sculpture guaranteed attention, a shield for his crumbling career. She didn't see it. She was too deep, blinded by his promises of a shared future. I almost pitied her, but pity burned away in the fire of her betrayal. She'd chosen him, built a world without me, and I'd make her see its cost. I began manipulating Clara directly, subtle enough to keep her guessing. I'd leave her studio in slight disarray. Tools moved, sketches flipped, mimicking Julian's chaos, planting doubts about his carelessness. She'd frown, blame herself, but I saw the cracks in her trust. I sent her a fake email from a gallery assistant, questioning her collaboration with Julian, citing his unreliability. She didn't reply, but her calls to him grew sharper. her voice edged with doubt. The Seattle trip loomed, 2 weeks away. I hacked their itinerary, finding hotel bookings, dinner reservations, a private studio visit. It wasn't just a launch. It was a celebration of their new life. I contacted the hotel, posing as Julian's assistant, and canceled their suite, citing a mix-up. I booked a single room under Clara's name, forcing them to scramble. Small chaos, but it was mine, a taste of the storm coming. I met Sam again, who'd traced their server to a cloud backup. We pulled more files, photos of the sculpture in progress, Clara's hands on clay, Julian's beside hers. One image showed them laughing, clay smeared, her head on his chest. I stared, my pulse steady, and saved it. Sam taught me to plant a virus, nothing destructive yet, just a shadow to disrupt their files later. I was learning to wield power like they wielded art, with precision and intent. At home, Clara was a ghost of herself, her warmth fading. She'd hug me, her arms mechanical, her eyes searching mine for suspicion. I gave her none, my face a mask of love. I planned a surprise dinner, inviting her gallery friends, knowing Julian would be there. He came, his charm dimmed, his eyes darting. I shook his hand, my grip firm, and watched him squirm under my smile. Clara watched too, her wineglass trembling. I was rewriting their script, and they felt it. I visited the Seattle Gallery, a reconnaissance trip under the guise of a book-buying errand. The space was grand, their sculpture's pedestal already built. I met the curator, charming her with questions, learning the event's security, its guest list, critics, buyers, names that could make or break them. I left with a plan forming, not just to ruin the sculpture but to turn their triumph into a spectacle of failure. I'd use their own art against them, their pride as my canvas. That night, Clara cried in her sleep, soft sobs I hadn't heard in years. I didn't comfort her. I lay still, my mind on the endgame. She'd built a dream with him, but dreams are fragile, and I was the hammer. The strings were taut, the stage set, and I was ready to pull. Clara was breaking, though she hid it behind smiles and clay-stained aprons. I saw it in her silences, the way she'd stare at her coffee, lost in thoughts she couldn't share. Julian's troubles were bleeding into her, his debts and cancellations a shadow over their plans. I fueled it, my moves invisible but relentless, each one a crack in their foundation. The sculpture was still their anchor, but I was loosening its moorings. I leaned harder on Julian's weaknesses. Lena, my forger, slipped a fake contract into a major collector's hands, suggesting Julian had sold the same piece twice. The collector, a man with no patience for games, called Julian's gallery, his anger loud enough to ripple online. Posts appeared, questioning Julian's ethics, his name trending for the wrong reasons. Clara's exhibition was tied to his, and I saw her panic. Calls to her agent, late-night pacing, her voice sharp with fear. I played my part at home, the steady husband, but my actions were a chess game. I'd leave notes for Clara, forgotten reminders of our past, photos from our honeymoon, a poem she'd written me. Each one was a mirror, reflecting what she was throwing away. She'd find them, pause, her eyes wet, but she'd say nothing, her guilt a weight she couldn't shed. I wanted her to feel me, to know I was closer than she thought. Ellis sent a new report. Julian was borrowing money, fast, to cover his debts before Seattle. The lender was a shady figure, someone who'd demand more than cash if crossed. I didn't act yet, but I filed it away, a card to play later. I focused on Clara, digging into her gallery's finances. She'd funneled our savings into the sculpture, thinking I wouldn't notice. I did, and I met my lawyer, redirecting funds to a private account, leaving just enough to keep her unaware. She was betting on their art, but I was betting on her fall. I hacked their server again with Sam's help, downloading their final plans. The sculpture was nearly done, set to ship to Seattle in days. They'd named it Union. A slap in my face, its curves meant to evoke eternal bonds. I found their promotional materials, flyers, invites, a video of Clara and Julian describing its soul. Her voice glowed, calling it their truth. I saved it all, my plan crystallizing. Their truth would be my weapon, twisted to expose them. I began disrupting their logistics. I called the shipping company, posing as Julian, and delayed the sculpture's transport, citing customs issues. It bought me time sowing chaos. Clara argued with him on the phone, her voice rising, blaming his carelessness. I smiled, washing dishes, my hands steady. I sent an anonymous tip to the Seattle curator, hinting at Julian's scandals, suggesting they verify his work. The curator emailed Clara, her tone clipped, and I watched her read it, her face pale. At dinner, I pushed harder, asking about her art, her dreams, my voice soft but probing. She stumbled, mentioning the sculpture, then stopped, her fork trembling. "It's just work," she said, but her eyes betrayed her. I leaned in, touching her hand, and said, "I'm proud of you." She flinched, pulling away, her guilt a wall between us. I let it linger, my warmth a blade, cutting deeper than anger could. I met Lena again, finalizing a new forgery, a letter from Julian to a rival gallery, offering the sculpture behind Clara's back. I'd plant it later, time to explode in Seattle. The art world loves drama, and I'd give them a show, one where Clara and Julian were the villains, not the visionaries. I looked at their sculpture's photos, its graceful lines, and saw my target. It wasn't just clay. It was their lie, and I'd make it their ruin. Clara came home that night, her hair damp, her smile forced. I kissed her forehead, my heart cold. The cracks were wide now, and I was ready to shatter what remained. Clara and Julian thought they'd weathered the storm, their sculpture packed, their trip to Seattle looming. I let them believe it, my silence a gift before the fall. They'd adjusted, rebooked the hotel, rushed the shipping. Her emails to him were hopeful again, talking of triumph. I read them, my screen glowing in the dark, and felt the calm before my strike. They were climbing, but I'd cut the rope. I finalized my tools. Lena's forged letter was ready, a masterpiece of betrayal, Julian promising the sculpture to another gallery, dated to look recent. I'd leak it to the Seattle curator hours before the unveiling, framing him as a traitor, leaving Clara to face the fallout. I had Sam prepare the virus, set to corrupt their presentation files. Photos, videos, their precious narrative. Replacing it with evidence of Julian's scams, my curated truth. I targeted Clara's confidence, eroding it subtly. I'd call her gallery, leaving messages as a concerned buyer, questioning her partnership with Julian, citing rumors. She'd argue with her agent, her voice fraying, her doubt in him growing. I left a fake review online, praising her solo work, implying her collaborations were weaker. She saw it, her jaw tight, and I watched her question their union, her faith in him cracking. Julian was unraveling too, his debts piling, his charm failing. I sent an anonymous package to his lender, a ledger of Julian's lies, half true but damning. The lender called him, Ellis reported, his tone sharp. Julian scrambled, borrowing more, his focus split. I wanted him desperate, distracted, blind to my moves. Clara felt it. She'd come home late, her eyes red, her excuses thin. I'd hug her, my warmth a lie, my plan a pulse beneath it. I staged a moment to shake her. I invited her to a quiet dinner, just us, at a restaurant we'd loved early on. I wore our wedding band prominently, talked of our past. Our first trip, her first vase, moments she'd forgotten. Her smile wavered, her hand trembling as she sipped wine. I gave her a gift, a sketchbook, like the one she'd used for Union, but blank, a silent challenge. She opened it, her breath catching, and said nothing, her guilt a tide pulling her under. I visited the Seattle gallery again, this time as myself, a curious local asking about the show. The curator was tense, Julian's rumors circling. I dropped a hint, casual but sharp, about checking artist contracts. She nodded, her pen tapping, and I knew she'd dig. I left, the pedestal for their sculpture gleaming under lights, a throne I'd topple. I pictured it crashing, their faces frozen, and felt a thrill, cold and pure. At home, I tightened my grip. I moved money again, leaving Clara's accounts bare enough to notice, blaming bank errors. She called, frustrated, her exhibition funds tight, her voice edged with panic. I offered to help, my tone loving, and she hesitated, her pride warring with need. I wanted her dependent, cornered, her options narrowing. She slept fitfully, her dreams troubled, and I lay beside her, my mind a map of her downfall. The night before their trip, I struck softly. I left Julian's thumb ring, bought to match his, on her studio table, with a note. Asterisk found this. Yours? Asterisk she found it, her face ashen, and burned the note, her hands shaking. She lied, saying it was a prop, but her eyes searched mine, fear flickering. I smiled, kissed her, and said, I trust you. The lie was hers, but the power was mine. I built a cage, and she was walking into it. Clara packed for Seattle, her suitcase heavy with hope, unaware I'd be there, a shadow in the crowd. Their dawn was false, a flicker before the dark. I looked at her, my wife, my betrayer, and saw the end. Not just of us, but of them, their art, their lies. I was ready to light the fuse, to watch it all burn in a way they'd never forget. Seattle was their dream's pinnacle, the gallery a cathedral for their union. But I'd make it their pyre. I arrived a day early, checking into a hotel across town, my face hidden behind glasses and a cap. The city buzzed, art crowds gathering, unaware of the drama I'd scripted. Clara and Julian were due tomorrow, their sculpture already at the gallery, gleaming under spotlights. I'd seen it in photos, a spiraled embrace, beautiful and false. I'd break it, not with a hammer, but with truth, twisted to cut deepest. I met Lena one last time, her forged letter perfected, now backed by fake emails I'd planted in Julian's account, thanks to Sam's hack. They showed him negotiating with a rival gallery, promising union for a higher cut, dated days ago. I'd leak it to the curator at dawn. Time to hit just as Clara and Julian arrived, their confidence high. The curator, already wary, would confront them, her trust shattered, their partnership exposed as greed. Sam's virus was loaded, set to strike during their presentation. Their slides, meant to showcase Union's creation, would glitch, replaced with Marianne's lawsuit, Julian's debts, screenshots of their emails calling Clara his key to fame. The crowd would gasp, critics typing, their legacy tainted in minutes. I tested the trigger on my laptop, a single click, my finger steady. Technology was my ally, cold and precise, a tool they'd never suspect. I walked the gallery at night, a late visitor, slipping past security with a borrowed badge. The sculpture stood alone, its curves catching moonlight, a lie made solid. I didn't touch it, destruction was too easy. Instead, I left a gift, a tiny replica of Clara's first vase, one I'd kept from our early days, tucked behind the pedestal. She'd see it, a reminder of what she'd traded, a splinter in her pride before the fall. Clara and Julian landed. Ellis confirmed, their texts upbeat, unaware of my shadow. I followed them from a distance, my car rental nondescript, watching them check into a cramped hotel, my cancellation still stinging. Clara laughed, her arm in his, but her eyes were tired, her doubt a crack I'd widened. Julian was tense, his phone buzzing, his lender, I guessed, my package working. I smiled, blending into the crowd, my plan a pulse beneath the city's hum. I contacted the curator, anonymous, sending a teaser of the forged letter, enough to make her dig. She replied, her tone sharp, promising to verify. I knew she'd call Julian, her questions ablaze, his lies crumbling under scrutiny. Clara would hear, her faith in him tested, their union, a weight pulling them down. I added pressure, tipping a blogger about Julian's scandals, linking to my planted posts. By morning, the art world was buzzing, their spotlight dimming. At my hotel, I reviewed my file, photos, emails, recordings, sketches, a museum of their betrayal. I burned a copy to a drive, labeled Truth, and mailed it to Clara's gallery, time to arrive after Seattle. She'd see it, her lies laid bare, her art tied to shame. I imagined her opening it, her hands shaking, Julian's name poison on her lips. But that was later, tomorrow was the show, my stage, their reckoning. I slept lightly, my dreams sharp, Clara's face, Julian's charm, their sculpture falling. I woke at dawn, my phone glowing with Ellis's update. They were at the gallery, rehearsing, their voices bright. I dressed, my cap low, and headed out, the virus trigger in my pocket, the forged letter sent. The city was alive, but I was its pulse, my revenge a song only I could hear. Clara thought she'd rewritten our story, but I was the author now, and their ending was mine. I stood across from the gallery, watching guests arrive, my breath calm. The fuse was lit, the curtain rising. They'd built their union, their lie, but I'd tear it down piece by piece, in a way that would echo long after the clay settled. This was my moment, and I was ready. The Seattle gallery hummed with anticipation, critics and collectors mingling under chandeliers, their voices a low tide of expectation. I stood at the back, my cap low, my pulse steady, a shadow among the crowd. Clara and Julian were center stage, beside their sculpture Union, its spiraled forms gleaming, a lie cast in clay. She wore a silver dress, her smile radiant but fragile, her eyes flicking to him for reassurance. He was polished, his charm a veneer over nerves I'd frayed. They thought this was their triumph. I was about to rewrite it. I'd triggered the first blow an hour ago, emailing the curator Lena's forged letter, Julian's deal with a rival gallery, promising union behind Clara's back. The curator's face was tight as she approached them, her clipboard a shield, her questions sharp. I watched Clara's smile falter, Julian's hands gesturing, his voice low, insistent. She shook her head, unconvinced, and walked away, leaving them whispering, their unity cracking. My phone buzzed, Ellis, confirming the curator was calling contacts, verifying my lie. Perfect. The crowd settled, the lights dimming for their presentation. Clara stepped to the podium, her voice warm, describing union as a fusion of souls. Her words laced with passion I hadn't heard in years. Julian joined her, his arm brushing hers, their smiles a performance. I gripped my phone, the virus trigger ready. Sam's code was flawless, any second now, their slides would betray them. I scanned the room, spotting my tiny vase replica behind the sculpture. Unnoticed, a ghost of our past waiting to haunt her. The screen flickered, Clara's sketch of union, replaced by a lawsuit, Marianne's, bold and damning, Julian's name in red. Gasps rippled, critics leaning forward. Julian froze, his charm useless, as the next slide showed his debts, emails calling Clara his ticket to fame. Her face drained, her eyes darting to him, betrayal dawning. The crowd murmured, phones glowing as posts spread. I leaned back, my breath calm, watching their world tilt. Clara tried to speak, her voice shaking, but the screen looped, my curated truth relentless. Screenshots, invoices, their own words twisted to expose greed, not love. Julian grabbed the projector cord, yanking it, but the damage was done. Collectors whispered, the curator's glare icy. Clara's hands trembled, clutching the podium, her dream crumbling under scrutiny. I felt no pity, only clarity. This was justice, my pen rewriting their story. They retreated to the sculpture as if it could shield them, but the crowd's mood had shifted, admiration to skepticism, their union now a scandal's prop. I slipped closer, catching Clara's eye for a moment, my face neutral. She paused, recognition flickering, but I turned away, blending into the throng. She'd feel me later when the pieces fell fully. For now, I watched Julian argue with a critic, his voice rising, Clara pulling him back, her desperation a mirror of mine months ago. I sent a final email, anonymous, to a blogger in the room, attaching the drive's contents. Every sketch, email, photo, their secret laid bare. It had hit online tonight, a wave they couldn't outrun. The gallery buzzed, but I was done here, my role played. I left the vase, the sculpture, the chaos, and stepped into the rain, my cap dripping, my heart cold. The curtain was up, and their act was failing. But I wasn't finished, not yet. Clara would see the depth of my hand, and it would cut deeper than this night. I walked to my car, the city alive around me, unaware of the ruin I'd wrought. Clara thought she'd built a new life, but I'd torn it down, brick by brick, and the final blow was coming. I looked back at the gallery's glow, imagining her face, and felt the storm inside me quiet. This was only the beginning of her reckoning. The fallout was instant, a wildfire I'd sparked with a single match. By midnight, the blog post hit, *union exposed. Betrayal in clay *, detailing Julian's deals, his debts, Clara's blind trust. I quoted their emails, my curated leaks, painting them as opportunists, their art a sham. X lit up, artists and critics piling on, hashtags trending. #union scandal, #art betrayed. I sat in my hotel, my laptop open, watching the wave crest, my fingerprints invisible. Clara called me, her voice a tremor through the static. Something's happened, she said. Not confessing, not yet, just needing me, the husband she'd forgotten. I played along, my tone soft, asking what was wrong. She stumbled, mentioning technical issues, misunderstandings. Her words a fragile dam against truth. I said I'd drive up tomorrow, my voice warm, my mind cold. She thanked me, her relief a lie, and hung up, unaware I was already here, orchestrating her ruin. Ellis sent updates. Julian was frantic, calling lawyers, his lenders circling. The curator had pulled union from the show, citing concerns. Its pedestal empty by dawn. Clara was holed up in their hotel, her phone off, Julian pacing, their partnership fracturing. I imagined her seeing my vase, its quiet presence a question she couldn't answer. Had she? I hoped it burned, a splinter in her guilt, linking this night to me. I drove to the gallery at sunrise, the doors locked, the sculpture crated away, a ghost of their ambition. I'd arranged one more move, a delivery to Clara's room, a package with no sender. Inside was a sketch, hers, of Union's figures, but I'd altered it, my pen adding cracks, a shadow of me watching. A note, typed, *, you built this. Now live with it. *, she'd find it soon. Her hands shaking, the truth closer than she wanted. The art world churned, galleries distancing from Julian. Clara's name tangled in his mess. Her exhibition back home was at risk, collectors pulling orders, her agent's emails curt. I'd sent the drive to her gallery too, arriving today, its contents a mirror she couldn't escape. Every lie, every moment she'd chosen him. I wanted her to see it, to know I'd seen it all, my silence louder than any shout. I met Sam, handing him cash for his work, his nod silent. He'd wiped our tracks, the virus untraceable, my hacks a ghost in their system. I felt no joy, only purpose. My revenge a machine I'd built, its gears still turning. Clara would return home, her career wounded, Julian's name mud. But I wasn't done. I needed her to face me, to see the cost of her choice, not just in Clay but in us. I walked Seattle's streets, rain soaking my jacket, the city indifferent to my victory. I thought of Clara's laugh years ago, her hands on mine, our life a promise she'd broken. She'd built Union to erase me, but I'd turned it into their cage, its beauty a trap I'd sprung. I checked my phone. More posts, her name fading, his buried. I smiled, small and sharp, and headed to my car. Tomorrow I'd meet her, my mask still on, my final act waiting. Clara texted, asking when I'd arrive, her words careful, testing. I replied, * soon, love. We'll fix this. * she'd believe it, clinging to my steadiness, blind to my hand. I looked at the gallery one last time, its windows dark, and drove south, the road stretching toward home. The echoes were spreading, but the loudest would come when she saw my eyes, when she knew I wasn't the man she'd left behind. I was something else now, and she'd learn what that meant. I reached Portland at dusk, our house quiet, its familiarity a lie. Clara wasn't back. She'd stayed in Seattle, sorting things, her texts vague, her voice thin when we spoke. I didn't push, letting her think I was waiting, the husband she could still manipulate. The drive I'd sent her gallery sat on my desk, returned unopened, a clerical error. I smiled, cold, and repackaged it, addressing it to her studio. She'd see it soon, my truth unavoidable. I walked our home, touching her pottery, my books, relics of a life she'd traded. Her studio was chaos. Sketches scattered, clay dust thick, the scarf I'd found months ago folded neatly, a taunt or a mistake. I burned it in the backyard, its stripes curling to ash, my hands steady. The air smelled of rain, and I felt the weight of my plans settle, its pieces aligned, my role clear. She'd come home tomorrow and I'd be ready. Clara arrived at noon, her suitcase heavy, her face drawn. She hugged me, her arms tight, her breath catching. "It's a mess," she said, eyes searching mine, testing for suspicion. I nodded, my voice soft, offering tea, my warmth a trap. She talked, blaming Julian's mistakes, the gallery's overreaction, her words a dance around truth. I listened, my face calm, my mind a blade, waiting for the moment to strike. I'd prepared the house, subtle but sharp. A photo of us on the mantel, her old sketchbook open to a drawing of me, my vase from Seattle on her workbench, its glaze catching light. She noticed, her steps slowing, her excuses faltering. I asked about Union, casual, my tone curious. She froze, her hands twisting, then said it was just art, her voice breaking. I smiled, letting her lie, knowing she felt my shadow. The gallery called, her agent's voice sharp through the speaker. The drive had arrived, its contents reviewed. Her emails, Julian's scams, their sculpture's false heart. Clara paled, her phone slipping, her eyes darting to me. I feigned concern, asking what was wrong. My hand on hers, cold and deliberate. She mumbled about misunderstandings, but her fear was clear. She knew someone had seen, and she was starting to suspect who. I pushed, gentle but relentless, asking about Julian, her trip, her art. Each question was a needle, piercing her calm, her answers stumbling. I mentioned the vase, saying I'd found it online, a collector's piece. Her breath hitched, her eyes wide, the Seattle night flashing in her mind. I leaned closer, my voice low, and said, "You've been so busy, love. I hope it was worth it." She flinched, her guilt a tide pulling her under. That night, I left the drive on her pillow, its label, Truth, stark in the lamplight. She found it, her gasp sharp, and opened it, her laptop glowing with my file, photos, recordings, her sketches of him, my proof of their world. She scrolled, her hands shaking, tears falling, my presence silent behind her. I didn't speak, letting the evidence scream, her betrayal a mirror she couldn't break. She turned, her voice a whisper. "How?" I said nothing, my eyes enough, cold and unyielding. Clara sobbed, her words spilling. Apologies, excuses, Julian's charm, her loneliness. I listened, my heart stone, her pain a debt she'd pay. I took the drive, locked it away, and said, "We'll talk tomorrow." She nodded, broken, thinking there was a path back. There wasn't. I'd shown my hand, not to forgive, but to mark her, to make her carry this night forever. I slept in the guest room, my plan's final piece waiting, its cruelty sharper than any blade. Morning came, gray and heavy, Clara a ghost at the table, her coffee untouched. She looked at me, her eyes red, pleading for a reprieve I wouldn't give. I'd planned this day, every move a note in my symphony of revenge, not just to wound but to reshape her world. Union was gone, her career bruised, Julian's name ash. But I wanted more, her soul, stripped bare, her choices a scar she'd never outrun. I started soft, offering breakfast, my voice steady, my warmth a lie. She ate, her hands trembling, waiting for my anger. But I gave her silence, letting her dread build. I'd contacted her gallery weeks ago, posing as a buyer, and arranged a review of her work, citing concerns over her ties to Julian. Today, her agent would call, dropping her contract, my whispers the cause. She'd learn soon, her art, her heart, tainted by my hand. I took her to her studio, saying I wanted to understand her work, my tone curious. She hesitated, then led me in, her sketches and tools a battlefield of lies. I pointed to the vase, my Seattle gift, and asked its story, my eyes locking hers. She stammered, claiming it was old, but her voice cracked, my shadow too close. I picked up a sketch of Union, altered by me, its cracks bold, and said, "This feels personal." She froze, her breath shallow, my meaning clear. The call came mid-morning. Her agent, voice clipped, ending their deal, citing reputational risks. Clara listened, her face crumpling, her phone falling. I held her, my arms a cage, whispering, "We'll fix it." My words poison. She clung to me, unaware I'd lit the fuse, her career collapsing because I'd made it so. I'd leaked more to blogs, her emails, twisted to suggest she'd known Julian's scams. Her name now a cautionary tale. I drove her to the gallery, saying it'd help to face it, my kindness a mask. The space was stark, her pieces pulled, a lone crate holding Union, returned, unwanted. She stared, tears falling, and saw my vase again, displayed as a donated relic. I'd arranged it, my note anonymous, calling it her first truth. She gasped, her knees buckling, my presence a weight she couldn't shake. I caught her, my voice soft, my heart ice. Julian called, his voice faint through her phone, begging to meet. I encouraged her, saying closure might help, my smile sharp. I followed, unseen, as she met him downtown, his face haggard, his charm gone. They argued, her voice rising, accusing him of lies, my forged letter a wedge between them. He grabbed her arm, desperate, but she pulled away, her trust shattered, my plan a ghost in their fight. I watched, my car a shadow, my victory cold. Back home, I gave her the final gift, a letter, typed, detailing every lie I'd found, every moment she'd chosen him, ending with, "Asterisk, you built Union." But I broke it, live with that. Asterisk, I left it in her sketchbook, open to a blank page, a challenge to start again, knowing she'd never outrun this. She read it, her sobs loud, her hands tearing the paper, but the words were in her now, my mark eternal. I packed a bag, saying I needed space, my voice calm. She begged, her arms around me, but I stepped back, my eyes stone. "You chose?" I said, my first truth aloud, and walked out, her cries echoing. I didn't look back. My revenge wasn't in leaving. It was in her future. Every mirror showing my hand. Every vase a reminder. Every gallery a tomb for her dreams. I'd won, and she'd carry the cost forever. I moved to a hotel. My life a new canvas. Clara's absence a weight I'd shed. She called. Texted. Her words a storm of apologies, promises, but I didn't answer. My silence her sentence. The art world had turned. Her name whispered with pity. Julian's buried in scorn. Union sat in storage, a relic of failure. Its beauty a lie no one wanted. I'd done that, my revenge a sculpture of my own, crafted with care, its impact eternal. I met my lawyer, finalizing papers. Not divorce, not yet, but a trust, locking Clara's assets, her savings tied to my terms. She'd live, but leanly. Her studio rent a struggle, her pride a ghost. I'd sold our house, splitting proceeds, my share funding a new start, hers barely covering debts I'd nudged. Suppliers, galleries, all tipped by me, demanding payment. She'd feel me in every bill, every closed door. I visited her gallery one last time, now showing new artists, her space erased. The curator nodded, unaware of my role, and mentioned Clara's retreat to a small town. Her art stalled. I'd heard. Ellis tracked her, a habit I kept, ensuring she'd never forget. She tried sketching again, but burned the pages, my altered union haunting her hand. I left, the city bright, my shadow long. Julian was gone, his loft foreclosed, his name a warning in art circles. I'd sent his lender a final tip, true debts exposed, sealing his fall. He'd written Clara, begging forgiveness, but she'd blocked him, my wedge too deep. I didn't care, he was collateral, his ruin a means to hers. I'd broken their bond, their art, their futures, my plan a blade no one saw coming. I started anew, a small apartment, my books lining shelves, no pottery in sight. Friends asked about Clara, and I smiled, saying we'd drifted, my pain private, my victory silent. I framed one sketch, hers of me from years ago, a reminder of who I'd been, not who I was. I worked, wrote, lived, my heart scarred but free, her betrayal a lesson I turned into power. Clara sent a letter, months later, handwritten, her words raw, guilt, love, a plea to talk. I read it, her pain vivid, my vase mentioned, its meaning clear to her now. I burned it, the ash mixing with rain, my answer final. She'd rebuild. Maybe, but never whole. My revenge a crack in her soul, widening with time. I'd taken her art, her trust, her dream, not with fists but with truth, sharper than any knife. I walked Portland streets, spring blooming, the air clean. A gallery invited me to a show, new artists, no trace of her. I went, my cap gone, my face open, a man remade. I saw a sculpture, abstract, not hers, and felt nothing but calm. Clara was a shadow, her union dust, my story written over hers. I'd torn down their world, not to destroy, but to claim mine, and it was enough. Years later, I heard she'd opened a tiny studio, teaching kids, her vases simple, her name quiet. She'd kept my vase, I learned, displayed alone, a confession or a wound. I didn't care which. I'd moved on, my life full, her betrayal a chapter closed. My revenge was cruel, yes, but fair, a balance for what she'd taken. Our life, our love, my place in her heart. I'd given it back, in pieces, and walked away, the ashes settled, my victory complete.